Good morning. Thank you for joining us for this session. Your interest and participation means so much to us. It helps us to get to know the audience in the room a little bit, so I would really appreciate if you show by your hands, when I say your continent, where you live, not where you're from, but where you live. So who is visiting here from Europe? All right, from Africa? One, just one, wow, welcome. South America? Amazing. Wow, okay, we have two. North America? Yeah. How many from the Bay Area? Okay, awesome. Asia? And Australia. Way to go, Mike. How many of you already consider yourself civic, tech, or social entrepreneurs and work in this space? Great. How many of you are crazy excited about the World Cup? Yeah. How many people are exhausted? Oh, equal. And can somebody tell me, did the USA win? They did, no? Okay. Trickier answer than I thought. Trickier. Okay. Well, thanks. We will go ahead and get started. We are here today to talk about how technology is transforming democracy and disasters, keeping people safe, and improving society. We're going to tell you stories from our work at Google, and we're going to tell you stories about entrepreneurs and companies outside of Google. We'll talk about open data and APIs that are available today. And most importantly, we're going to engage you in a conversation because we want to support you, the developers, and figure out how we can collaborate better together. This is the beginning of a long journey, and it's only with the enthusiasm and passion of people like those in this room, that will make a difference. My name is Stephanie Hannon. Along with my colleagues, Hysen and Payal Patel, we're crazy proud to be here to talk with you today. We three are part of a team at Google called Social Impact, and we apply our engineering talent to social and humanitarian problems, like improving society, improving democracy, keeping people safe, ending repressive censorship, and making the nonprofit ecosystem more impactful. I've been building products at Google for almost a decade, from launching Gmail all over the world, to building maps for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and even launching Google Wave on this stage. Anyone? Wave fans? Woo! Thank you. But I joined this team earlier this year because I was in awe of the problems that need attention, and also Google's commitment with resources and people to trying to solve and make a big impact. I'd like to share two examples of the type of work our team does by taking you back to 2012, when Hurricane Sandy hit the eastern seaboard just 8 days before the US election. I probably don't need to remind you that Hurricane Sandy was the deadliest and destructive of that season. Its winds spanned 1,000 miles, and more than 268 people died in the 7 countries it touched. The damage in the US alone was $68 billion. As you can see, this is a picture of Hoboken. More than half of Hoboken was flooded, as was chunks of Staten Island and Brooklyn and lots of coastal communities. The streets were turned into rivers, and lives and homes were ravaged. At a moment like this, there's a lot of critical need for information about resources. You can see this is a picture of a Hess gas station in New Jersey where cars lined up for hours and hours. Nobody knew where gas was and how to get it. The Google Crisis team was able to publish this crisis map, and all the green dots on there represent availability in the tri-state area. You could change it to different types of inventory questions. And the real challenge here is fresh, real-time information, because in a moment like this, there's not a single source of data available. So we were able to build this by working with distributors like Hess, with government agencies, and with crowdsourcing efforts like GasBuddy and Maplet. Some of the best source of information was high school students in New Jersey who were calling constantly gas stations, and we got fresh real-time information. And the challenge at Google is to ingest data from all these different sources in lots of different formats, sanitize it, and publish it to consumers in a useful way. And tens of thousands of people viewed this map, and we hope it helped keep them safe and warm. Payal is going to talk a lot more about our crisis efforts today. Another challenge was dozens of polling locations were flooded just days before the US election. And the government had this incredible challenge of how do we get information out about where people should go to vote. So a company called Mobile Commons built an SMS messaging app. It was really simple. You would SMS your home address, and it would return your polling location. It was built in partnership with city and state governments, and it leverages the Google Civic Information API, which Eric will tell you a lot more about today. The governor of New Jersey and the mayor of New York got out on social media and in press conferences and promoted this. And the locations were changing hour by hour, so it was a pretty important service. And in the days leading up to the US election, more than 200,000 people used it to find their polling location. So Google Crisis Map and Google Civic Information API are two examples of the work we are trying to do to keep people safe and improve society. And what's really amazing to me is that we in this room have the ability to touch people on a global scale with our products and services. It's remarkable that the amazing amount of technology and computing power that I can hold in my hand. And today, over 60% of the global population has a cell phone. And more than 3 billion people are online with access to the internet. Technology has already transformed media and commerce. It has the potential to fix democracy, improve education, and secure opportunity and happiness for all people. We, along with a community of people in this room and around the world, are working in this space, and we hope by you guys coming to this talk today, we're gonna recruit even more. And I just wanna say, this is the only use of a prop all day, so if you came for sexy demos, wrong room. So as we've been working in this space, we've developed 3 principles that are critical to our work. I wanna share them with you, and then we'll talk about them throughout the conversation today. The first is designing for openness and interoperability. If you want to work in disaster response or civic engagement, you need to work with governments. And there's thousands of government entities around the world, and they're lacking incentives to open up data in common formats. So it would not be great if we built something that worked for San Francisco, but it didn't work for Seattle or Rio or Tokyo. So thinking early about common formats, how to organize people around them, and building for openness and interoperability and advocating for open data has been a big part of our work. Second, in our experience, the way open data is published is very rarely consumable in an easy format by people or by developers. And so a lot of work has been about transforming data so that we can build meaningful consumer product features in Google Now, Search, and other places, but also giving it back to you guys in a platform and through APIs so you can do meaningful things too. And finally, a third principle for us, I noticed in the keynote, all good things come in 3, right? Everyone sees that. Think like a startup. So the same aggressive way you would pursue an idea and try to fail fast, the same attention to user segmentation and who you're serving. At Google, for example, we're working really hard on search quality around the nonprofit ecosystem. And it's a decision whether we're trying to reach the people who are donating and volunteering or trying to reach the people who are looking for services. So be clear about your user segments and who you're trying to serve. Also, in thinking like a startup, funding is available. There's VC funding, there's foundation funding. You can build sustainable, scalable businesses. So think like a startup as you approach this. And finally, there's tons of action in the space around weekend projects or hackathon, and that's great. More ideation is good. But this can also be sustainable and scalable businesses. It can be your full-time gig. And I hope you'll think about that today. As we go out and advocate and talk to groups, people often ask, is there funding available? Can I really work in this space? So you can see in this graph from the Knight Foundation that civic tech is on the fast growth. 121 companies were started in 2012 alone. And I apologize that the text here is so small. So lots of activity, lots of growth in civic tech, but is funding available? So in the period from January of 2011 to May of 2013, 431 million, sometimes I say 2, so I have to check the slides. $431 million were invested in civic tech. And the investment comes in all different ways. The Omidyar network did 16 investments in this space alone. Y Combinator is now supporting civic tech startups and nonprofits in its program. Alumni of the Code for America program are starting lots of amazing civic tech companies. Lots of action, which is why it's so exciting that you chose to be here with us to talk about it today. So I'm going to turn it over soon to my colleagues. We're going to talk about these principles. We're going to dig into some stories about the work we do. And then we're really excited to have this open conversation about how we can work better together. And now for Eric.
Cool. Thank you, Steph. My name's Eric Hysen. I manage our elections and civic engagement products. I've been a part of this team since 2009, and before that worked on political campaigns. I want to start by going back to the 2008 US election. Just 6 years ago, but feels a long time away, a long time ago. So think about, imagine you're getting ready to vote in that election. Think about the information you might need, what you would need to do. One of the top things on your list is probably where you vote. If you're anything like me, you probably think that you could go online for this information. Unfortunately, it turns out that, again, just 6 years ago, in 39 states, there was no way to find this information online at all. But even pausing that for a second, let's say you were lucky. You lived in one of the 11 states that did put this information online, say New Hampshire. This is the service the New Hampshire state government provides for looking up your voting information. Try to work through it with me. You have two options here. On the left, you can enter in a whole lot of personal information. That actually has nothing to do with where you're assigned to vote at all. Or on the right, you get to do two things. First, you select your street from a drop-down of every street in the state. And then, and I've still never figured this part out. I've looked at this site a lot. You pick if your street number is between 1 and 99 or 1 and 131. Or if you're at all rational, you would probably come across a site like this and give up. And that makes sense, but let's think through the consequences of that. If you're trying to vote, it's election day, you've probably seen a lot of polling places, maybe you passed one on your drive into work. So you stop there on your way home. You very likely could end up in a line like this one. You could wait in this line, possibly for hours, just to get to the end and finally figure out this wasn't actually your polling place. So the poll worker there checking you in will probably very happily tell you where you actually go to vote. But at this point, you've been waiting for hours. You probably have to get home to your family or go back to work. How likely are you to actually cast your vote? This isn't just an individual problem. This can happen to hundreds of thousands of people. It's particularly bad for the least advantaged among us who really don't have this time to spare. And it's not just about finding your polling place, but about registering to vote on time or bringing the right forms of ID to the polls. In aggregate, what are just frustrating experiences individually can sway the outcome of an election just because people don't have the information they need in an easy format. So this is where Google comes in. As you might imagine, the quality of our search results is particularly important to us. So we have a lot of people across the company who are frequently looking through our broad aggregate trends, trying to be sure that we're doing a good job of answering our users' queries. So in the run-up to the 2008 election, we had some of these folks that kept seeing these spikes for searches like, where do I vote, as elections approached. That makes sense. But like we just saw, we really couldn't do a very good job of answering these questions because the information either wasn't out there or wasn't easily accessible. So we decided that we had an obligation and the ability to do much better. We set out to collect and standardize this information and quickly ran into the fact that, like many government services in the US, voting is actually not run at the national level, not even run at the state level. It's run in the thousands of individual counties in most cases. So this means that there are thousands of different government agencies all running voting, and of course they all do it differently. So rather than go at this alone, we worked with some partners, notably the Pew Charitable Trusts, to set up a group called the Voting Information Project to go out, collect, and standardize this information. We expected things to be pretty tough, but we're still pretty shocked at some of what we saw. This is one example. This is actually from 2012. It's unfortunately not too much of an outlier. I really wish it were. But this is what the team got when they talked to the election officials in Dale County, Alabama, and asked for information on how to map voters to polling places. So they got faxed back this document, and there are a lot of problems. My favorite is here. You can see how they tried to update this for 2012, just crossing out 2006. Problems like this really are not uncommon when dealing with government data. One other example, the state of Texas, a huge state, doesn't finalize their polling places until the Friday before the election. So you have 72 hours to collect this, standardize it, process it, get it out there to users. But the team persevered, and in the end, we had thousands of different files, all different formats. This is where our first pillar comes in. Rather than try to deal with them all separately, we created a standard data format to make this easier to use, the first ever interoperable data format for voting information. It's an XML-based format called the VIP Voting Information Project XML spec. And here's a little bit of how it works. Since we're at a developer conference, I can show some XML. So polling places in the US are assigned based on these things called street segments. Unlike most other uses of anything related to geodata, you don't have shape files in this case, but tabular data that are lists of ranges of addresses on a street, even down to what side of the street you're on, because the lines for which polling place you go to can actually be drawn down the middle of a street. So you need something that's a little more precise that governments are able to use. So this XML defines a street segment in Virginia, maps it to a precinct, and then another part of the XML says where that precinct goes to vote and gives you that in a structured format. Other parts of this data give us things like ballot information, rules on voting, early vote places, things like that. In the end, this is what we turn this data into. This is how you can now get voting information on Google, just by entering in your address. On the left, you get your polling place, opening hours, a link to Google Maps for directions. On the right, you get information on your ballot all the way down to the local level. This has been incredibly successful so far. In 2012, this was used over 24 million times to find information on how to vote. And that's been great. We've been really amazed at how that's been used. But as Steph said at the beginning, our team's goal is to try to address these social issues at large. And helping Google users find this is really important, but it's far from the entire story. So as we were doing this, we kept running into other groups that were looking at similar problems. One of them was the League of Women Voters. They're a voter education group, one of the oldest in the country. If you get these thick paper ballot guides in the mail before an election, they're the people responsible for those. They do really great work, and they, as a lot of folks do, wanted to do more online. And they started looking at how they could tell their users where their polling places were. So their first attempt was to take these 51 XML files from every state in DC and try to process them like we were doing. But we all pretty quickly realized that was not the best idea. It turns out it's a lot better to have a data format than to have just jumbled data, but it's still not all that easy to work with. And groups like the League are not technology companies. They're civic engagement nonprofits. So their time is best spent actually engaging voters, not building data processing pipelines. So this is where our second principle comes in. Just having open data, even if it's in a great format, and even if it's interoperable, isn't always enough. You need to transform it to make it useful for people to really distribute it at scale. So to do that, we built the Google Civic Information API. This is a free API that exposes all of that information very easily. You just pass in an address and get back a response about all the voting information associated with that place. This is a simple request. It's just the plain text address and an ID number that's associated with what election we're talking about. The documentation is on the developer site down there. Here's the response. It's in JSON. Again, not too complicated. You get your polling place, some details about that, information on the contests on the ballot, other things like that. So the API has been very successful as well. This was actually what powered Mobile Commons that Steph was talking about at the beginning in making an SMS-based service for use during Hurricane Sandy. Mobile Commons was able to focus on dealing with building a fast, responsive mobile interface. They let us handle all the messy data work. The API actually ended up being so successful, we used it for our own product. We didn't expect to do this. And the voter information tool that I showed you a couple slides ago is fully open source. It uses the Civic Information API, the Maps API, and a number of other Google developer tools. And you can get the code at Google Code right up there. But after every election, we also then started hearing from these developers that they wanted to extend their apps. No one wants to build something that's just usable in a small moment. And they wanted to extend it from contests and candidates and polling places to elected officials and politics every day. So last year, we expanded this API to include a new representative info query. It will give you information on political districts, elected officials, offices in pretty much the same way as what I just showed you. One of the top developers using this so far is change.org. If you haven't seen them, they're an online petition site, one of the biggest. And if you're familiar with online petitions, you've probably come across the criticism that it's hard to take them seriously because anyone could be signing them. You have no idea where they live or who they actually are. So what change.org did is they used the Civic Information API to create a new feature that tells an elected official how many of the people that signed a petition actually live in their district and are their voters. So it addresses one of the key problems to taking the online activism seriously, and also gives elected officials new insight into what's important in their district. Change.org is also a great example of the third principle that we're talking about, think like a startup. They have a social mission. They're trying to empower anyone to drive change through their petitions and through their product. But they've also thought and approached this with all the normal tools of a startup. And as a result, they have 300 paying clients and $25 million in revenue. So our team's work also goes internationally. It was great seeing so many of you from other parts of the world. This is an example of a map we built for India's election, which ended last month. We've done work like this in over 40 countries. India was one of the craziest. Their election is the biggest election in the history of democracy. So there are over 800 million voters, and it's so many that they can't actually all vote on one day. Instead, they split up voting across 9 days over 5 weeks. So you can imagine everything I was just saying for the US, 9 times more complicated. It was a ton of fun. But what we did was we built this map that, now that the election's over, shows results of the voting in every district. But before that, users could enter in their zip code and find candidates that are running in their district. We presented a lot of information that we aggregated about those candidates, including something that I was surprised to learn was particularly relevant for Indian politics, the candidates' criminal histories. So you can see this guy was the incumbent member of parliament in New Delhi. You can see that he had a criminal case against him. When he was in parliament, he only actually showed up 37% of the time. And then, as he, in last month's election, ended up getting kicked out of office. He only got 18% of the vote. Our API that I mentioned, the Civic Information API, is currently US only, but there are developers worldwide, hopefully many of you in this room as well, that are doing work like this, and that are also building tools to make it easier to get involved anywhere. One of those examples of many is Populous. This is a group that started when developers in the UK and in Chile were working together and realized that they were building very similar tools that were just launched in different countries. So they started a set of components that are reusable and interoperable, customizable, fully open source, that let developers in any country easily build some of these different Civic apps with much less startup cost. So that's a little bit about some of the work our team is doing, making information on the democratic process easier to access. There are some of the tools that we talked about. If you're interested in this space, I hope you'll take a look at some of them. And I want to hand it over to Payal, who will talk about one of the other big challenges our team works to address.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Payal Patel, and I'm a product manager on the Google Crisis Response team. How many of you recognize this screen? Okay, a good number of hands. You probably also remember the long, shrieking sound that played with it. This is the emergency broadcast system, originating from the 1960s, that used traditional media, such as television and radio, as the primary means for alerting authorities to get critical information, such as tornado warnings, out to the affected public. Now, fast forward to 2012, and some of you might recognize this message, which also has a loud, blaring tone that plays with it. There are now wireless emergency alerts that allow authorities to geographically target text-like messages to get critical information out using cell towers. Now, while these alerts are very effective to let people know when they're in danger, they have their limitations as to providing details about this emergency situation and really further actionable content. So people usually turn to the internet to get this additional information. Now, step back 2 years ago. Let's say you're in central Tennessee and you hear a siren go off. You think it might be a tornado, you're not sure, so you turn to Google search and you search, is there a tornado? Traditional search results actually weren't that relevant. There wasn't any mention of the tornado warning that was just issued moments ago. It shouldn't be this difficult to find critical information when minutes count. And this is the problem that our team set out to solve. We've done this by building an emergency broadcast platform for the internet called Public Alerts. It aggregates, ranks, and surfaces emergency messages like this tornado warning into everyday tools people use, such as search, within minutes of issuance. Now, as you can imagine, a major component in building this type of platform is actually getting the authoritative content. So how did we go about doing this in a scalable way? Every alert issuer has their own means of creating alerts and their own dissemination mechanism. Some have a Twitter feed, some have a website. Some don't have any information online at all. It'd be much easier if there was a standard that these alert issuers used. And it turns out there actually is. It's called the Common Alerting Protocol, CAP. About 13 years ago, CAP was designed in consultation with over 100 emergency managers. And it's been adopted as an international standard. So why is this standard important? Well, if data providers can create a RSS or Atom feed with all of their content in the CAP format, then it becomes easy to exchange this information across various platforms. So let's look at an example. This is an example of a tsunami warning issued by BMKG, the official alerting authority in Indonesia. This is the alert in the raw text format. And for those of you that can read Bahasa Indonesian, could tell that this has really useful content. But it's difficult to machine parse as is. Now here's the same tsunami warning in CAP. CAP is an XML-based alerting spec that normalizes the formatting and provides a standard and flexible way to target alerts by dimensions such as language, event type, a headline, and description. And again, like Eric and Steph mentioned earlier, building a product around a standard is important for us because it plays a critical role in designing for openness and interoperability. Our team has really embraced the CAP standard and are doing as much as we can to drive adoption globally. We've served over 500,000 alerts from 17 different alert providers across 7 different countries and in 6 different languages. And this is just the beginning. So now in 2014, nearly a decade since the devastating Indian Ocean tsunami, how do people get emergency information online? Well, if you're in the coastal region of northern Sumatra in Indonesia and have the Google search app installed on your Android or iOS device, your phone would buzz to notify you that there is a tsunami warning in effect, and you could take action on it. You'd also be given relevant information about the situation, such as estimated arrival times and wave heights in a familiar, easy-to-consume format. Again, this is not just about getting the authoritative content, but really transforming that data and making it useful. Similarly, if you're in Sanmin, Taiwan, you're notified via Now if there's an oncoming typhoon. Or if you're in Timbiqui, Colombia, during rainy season and want to check if you're affected by a landslide warning, you can quickly find that authoritative information and take action to stay safe. Since we've launched public alerts, we've received feedback from users stating that they were notified and able to get relevant information about the situation they were in and take action, such as seeking shelter to stay safe. Other users have said that this was the only way they learned about the situation they were in, because their mobile phone is their only means for staying connected. So now, what can you as developers do to help? Well, what you're developing or your product might be where some of your users spend a majority of their time. And therefore, it can become a distribution point for emergency alerts. You can help keep your user community safe by integrating alerts into your product. One way for you to do this is to subscribe to our Alert Hub, which is where we host all the official data feeds that we've onboarded in their raw format. Alert Hub is open to the developer community, and it follows the PubSub Hubbub protocol. You can also check out the current publisher feeds that we have available at the second URL. Or if you're interested in accessing public alerts at a higher level, you can become a beta tester of our public alerts API. You can see the API in action at this demo URL. The demo site gives you a map list and a list view of all the current alerts that are accessible. And on the right, you can see the JSON output. If you click on any of the active alerts, you're then directed to the alert details page. And if at any given time you want to see what alerts are active in our database, you can go to google.org/public-alerts. Apart from public alerts, I want to quickly run through a few other projects that our team works on. These are all open source projects. One Person Finder, it's a tool that helps people reconnect with their loved ones during the aftermath of a disaster. Crisis Map, which is a rich geo mashup tool designed to share critical content, and it's optimized for mobile use. And finally, we also have a Java CAP library that can be used for creating, parsing, and validating CAP alert feeds. Now, I want to quickly switch gears and highlight a couple projects outside of Google that were developed by programmers during a disaster situation and really had high impact. I'm sharing these examples to give you all an idea of how high impact tools can be developed in a crisis situation. This is an image from March 2011 in Fukushima, Japan, after the massive magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck, followed by a catastrophic tsunami. Within the developer community in Japan, there were nationwide hackathons for programmers that wanted to apply their technical skills to help those that were affected by the disaster. One of the apps that was developed was Win from Fukushima. This app was basically a mobile emergency kit for those affected by the nuclear power plant explosion in Fukushima. It calculated radiation levels around the area, taking into account wind speed and direction. It also provided users with the resource information, such as where they could find clean water and food. In order to develop this app, official and accurate content, again, was critical. The developer used openly available radiation data provided by local government, ministries, and the power companies. The raw data was in a difficult to consume format, so he took out the relevant data, mashed it up with relevant user-generated data, and was able to present it to users in an easy-to-consume format. Again, this is an example of taking open data and transforming it to become useful. This app was specifically built for Fukushima, and while it was not necessarily scalable, it had immense impact on the residents in Fukushima in that many relied on it on a day-to-day basis to help guide them and stay protected. Another tool I want to quickly highlight was one that was used during Hurricane Sandy. A major challenge during the recovery phase of a disaster is managing the influx of volunteers and the immense work that needs to be done on the ground in an organized way. This is the problem Crisis Cleanup solves. It's a collaborative work order management system for disaster recovery agencies. It uses a Craigslist-like approach in that any organization that knows of work that needs to be done can submit it, and then any organization with the capacity to take that work on accepts it and gets to help right away. Crisis Cleanup is a really good example of an open source tool that thought like a startup. They were passionate about an idea, were aggressive about getting funding, and built a scalable tool. It's helped over 10,000 households across 13 different disasters in the US, the Philippines, Australia, and India. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Steph, who's going to summarize all that we've talked about.
In the tradition of great presentations, we told you a bunch of stuff, and now I'm going to tell you what we told you. From addressing crime to turning us all into citizen scientists, online tools and apps have the power not just to make lives more convenient, but empower and inspire entire communities. These are 7 of the stories we featured today, but they're 7 of hundreds, and we wanted to tell a lot more. In fact, there's 3 companies, ClickFix, OpenCounter, and WotC, that we wanted to talk about, but I thought we had a whole hour. And then when they told me we had half an hour, we had to do a little editing. But check them out, please. WotC, ClickFix, and OpenCounter are other amazing civic innovation startups. And when we rehearsed this, lots of people asked, why did we pick these 7? Well, some of them are our partners and use our APIs, but some of them we just admire. Some follow the principles we laid out today, but not all of them. The Wind app wasn't built for scale or sustainability. It was one engineer with a passion and a problem to solve, and he had incredible impact in just a few days. And I hope we all, as engineers and developers, feel like we have that potential too. So now you're probably thinking, how do we get started? What can we do? There's so many ways to get involved. As Payal said, your app could be a distribution point for public alerts. You might want to use the Google Civic Information APIs to do something really cool for the US midterm elections or for the 2016 presidential elections. Or, as Eric said, the Google Civic Information API is US only. If you want to talk to us about how to make it available to your country or city, or even how to be an advocate for open data in your community, we'd love to talk. If you can remember nothing else, these are the 2 URLs that will get you to all of the information about the APIs and open source tools that we talked about today. And I love how many cameras are taking a picture. Do it. And Google, those are Google resources, but they're just, Google is part of this huge ecosystem, and there's so much information and so many tools available. So we put together a list and a short URL at the bottom. If you want to check out Code for America, Hack for the Hood, Hack for Change, sorry, Sunlight Foundation, data.gov, and lots of other resources. I want to put a short plug-in that today at 4 p.m. in this very room, there's going to be a panel with 3 finalists from the Bay Area Google Impact Challenge. And if you're interested in this space, I think you'd really enjoy it. And also, the Code for America Fellowship application for the 2015 year is available now. I heard some clapping. That was awesome. So this is my last slide. It's my call to action. And I'm going to mix it up by showing you pictures unrelated to anything we talked about for the last half an hour. We live in a remarkable time. Most of us have lived through the PC revolution. We've witnessed the invention of the internet, and in the last decade, seen a proliferation of devices, from mobile phones to tablets to watches, and yes, even the self-driving car. With all this new connectivity, many parts of human existence have fundamentally improved. And yet, we're barely scratching the surface of how this online connected world can tackle some of our biggest challenges, from access to education, availability of energy and clean water, poverty, hunger, climate change, and public safety. I don't have the answers, and I'm impatient. I think most of us that work in this internet world are somewhat impatient. But social change is hard, and it takes time. And it's only with lots of ideation, lots of building, and lots of collaboration that we'll continue to make progress. And that's why we, Google, hope to take on some of the messiest problems so we can give to you guys platforms and clean APIs and data for you to innovate on. There's no use in us all reinventing the wheel. And if you're new to this space, one thing I hope you take away from today is that there is funding available and there are social ventures that want to hire you. And I hope you'll continue to think like an entrepreneur and be scrappy, ambitious, and flexible. We, Google, are so proud to be part of this ecosystem, and we want to talk now about how we can better serve you as developers, because we're all in this together. Thank you. So I think we have a few minutes for questions, and would love for anyone to come to the mic and talk about these projects or anything else, projects you're working on, APIs you want to see. We welcome questions.
Are your APIs available on YQL or other places where you can access the APIs without downloading the XML?
The APIs are all, on the Civic information side, it's listed on the Google developer site, which is the main hub for all APIs there.
I don't know specifically about YQL.
I don't know specifically, no.
OK, we don't know about YQL, if it's a place we should publish.
YQL is from Yahoo. It's a way that you can query any data on the web through a single REST API.
Yep.
OK, we'll check it out. Not today, but we'll check it out. Thank you. Question?
Hi, Steph, Eric, Payal, great talk, by the way. I just have a quick question. With like the evolution of like Internet of Things and new technology, I was just wondering what your guys' long-term vision, like say 3 to 5 years out, looks like.
Wow, 3 to 5 years out. Do you guys want to talk about your spaces?
It's a good question. I think we want to see where, we want to see what all of you can come up with, and I think we're going to be informed by where everyone else is going and what amazing things we can do. I think there are a lot of ways that the work we're doing is barely scratching the surface. I think we can, there's ways we can scale globally, particularly we can scale more locally. We're looking now at particularly how we can start to plug into give a more personalized and more assistive approach to a lot of this work too. But that is a very broad answer.
I think we also each have personal passions. I've worked in the geospace for a long time, and I have a personal mission of no wasted time. Like, just no wasted time. Like, why do we sit in traffic? Why do we wait for parking? Why is there a line at 13 Bakery? There shouldn't be wasted time, and we have an amazing set of location data that can help cities run more efficiently. Mm-hmm. So that's a personal passion of mine, and I think in each of the spaces we work on, we have big visions like that driving us.
Cool. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Good talk.
Hi, and thank you. I noticed that Google seems to have a public policy group and then the Civic. So I think one of the questions I have is all the focus on voting, but voting is not enough, right? We need to be involved in our community, and wouldn't it be good if in the voting app there was something that showed people how to get involved in their community boards and actually become mayor, and we should be involved in public policy, not just voting.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Wholly agree. So you saw a slice of one of the product areas we work on. Another whole area we're working on is called civic engagement. And it's about how you get people engaged with their local community, because we live in a world where people don't even know their neighbors or people on their block.
They don't even know their representatives.
They certainly don't know the representative. And I live by Dolores Park, closed for half a year. I had no idea it was coming. So things happen every day that affect my bike lanes, my schools, my parks. Nobody knows about it. So we have a huge suite of engineers and product people trying to think about civic engagement and how to get people not just to be informed, but to take action and to care. And if you're excited, talk to us, but also maybe we can feature some of those if we're lucky enough to be here next year.
Yet they know everything about the World Cup.
Yeah, everything about the World Cup. I'm with you. We're so happy you're here.
Thanks for throwing up that Code for America Fellowship application. I'm a fellow this year, and I would encourage everyone to apply and check it out. My question is actually about the Civic Information API. I'm curious how that gets updated. Is there a process for that? Like, so when some of the information is out of date, I'm just curious.
Yep, so we work with a number of different groups that collect this data, and as well as some groups that crowdsource some of this data collection. So as more elections are happening, we are constantly updating it. But it's also long-term, I think one of the big questions in the space is how can we reduce the amount of manual work it takes? So I think it's an interesting challenge, but we definitely are staying up to date now.
Okay, great.
So there's nothing we can do to update portions of it or anything like that? Is there a way we can contribute?
Yeah, I think one of the projects we're working with is Sunlight's Open States project, which is looking at crowdsourcing all of this information. So I think they're the best route to go with right now.
Yeah, and come talk to us afterwards.
Yes.
We'd love help. So we're gonna just take the 2 more questions. Yeah, you guys.
Thanks again for sharing. A lot of those anecdotes were very interesting to see. I guess like the data comes up, as kind of users, and then we just kind of see it's like, oh, it's magically appears. But with a lot of the voting things, I'm really interested as we're pulling in different information from all the different sources, and we're trying to be selective on what's very effective to show to the different users. How do you try to be neutral in that entire process, especially with something that's sensitive voting?
Yeah. We're very focused on just what is the core information that you need procedurally to cast your ballot right now, and then giving you the options to explore from there. So we'll tell you who's on your ballot. We'll make it easy to search for them on Google, which will give you way more information, or find them on social networks. But yeah, right now we're being very selective on what information we're presenting that is is the core procedural information.
I'm going to ask Eric a tough follow-on question to that, which is, doesn't even the placement of which candidate comes first in search results or showing the ballot matter?
That's a good question, Steph. And that's something I have learned way more about than I ever expected when joining this team. We follow the order that candidates actually appear on the ballot when it is available to us. Otherwise, we'll look at randomizing the order. We take all of that very seriously.
Great. Our last question.
Hi, thank you. My name is Norman Avila. I'm coming from Guatemala. I am very interested since almost 1 year ago about implementing CAP alerts in Central America. I know that agencies in Central America don't have a data feed or alerting feed. We have earthquakes, floods, volcanic eruptions, everything. So I don't work for an official agency. I'm just somebody that likes weather and maps and this kind of information. I would like to know, you mentioned that there were like funding for this kind of projects. Do you have any leads that we can see? As I'm telling you, I think that the effort in Central America couldn't be individually by country. I already know agencies that coordinate weather services or emergency management agencies, and I have worked on projects, not as an agency employee, but as a technology consultant for regional projects where same system is used by all the region, instead of replicating the same technology and the same cost in every country. But I know that the effort is not only to say, okay, this is the standard, please implement it. We have to start by organizing the agencies and then providing the technology. So I would like if you can give us any feed that we can get in touch.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So as we've expanded globally, we've learned, some countries, they were already publishing CAP. Some countries we worked with, they didn't have CAP, but they were motivated. They had the technical resources at those agencies to start publishing CAP. And then now we're coming across countries where, like Guatemala, where they're very disaster prone, but they just don't have the resources to put towards.
Or the protocols even to what to do in case of this.
Right. So we actually are looking at, there already is an open source tool to help agencies publish CAP. So it's an easy to use tool that doesn't require any technical resources, but there's a bit of work required for that tool depending on the country. Like you said, like it's different for each agency. So that's one way you could help is building on top of this open source tool. And I'm happy to talk to you afterwards.
Okay, I'll wait for you then.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
Great. We're so grateful you came today. Thank you and enjoy the rest of IO.